Alright guys, today we're going to be doing a little bit different of a video, and it's going to be another wrestling topic and something that I've wanted to cover on the channel for a really long time, but it's just something of the fact of how much of this topic do I cover, because if I covered every tidbit like some other channels have done, this video could be close to an hour, and I'm not trying to do that. But what we're going to cover is one of the most interesting and deep character developments in Mark Calaway, aka The Undertaker's career. The Ministry of Darkness. But not only the Ministry, because we can't cover everything that went on in the Ministry of Darkness. Like I said, it would just take too long. It's more just going to be The Undertaker's character development in 1999, because although a lot of people feel like the Ministry of Darkness wasn't done as good as it could have been and wasn't developed in the way that it should have been, especially when it comes to the higher power, which we'll get to later, I still feel like Undertaker as a character, as a presence, and as just an overall package, did some of his best work in 1999 before he got injured later on in the year. So this is going to be Undertaker's career in 1999. We're going to kick it off in January. I believe it was the January 11th, 99 episode of Monday Night Raw, where Undertaker made his first sacrifice as the leader of this occult or of this ministry. He would sacrifice Dennis Knight, who would come to be known later on as Midian inside the Ministry of Darkness. It was basically a human sacrifice on the Raw is War stage, even making Midian drink the blood of The Undertaker in a sort of satanic ritual. But this was the first member recruited under the new faction for the Dead Man, or the Phenom, the Demon of Death Valley, whatever you want to call him. He's had many nicknames over the years. But it kicked off right before the Royal Rumble in 99, and even though the Royal Rumble in 1999 wasn't a huge thing for the Ministry, it kind of put the building blocks in place for how this entire story would fizzle out and develop throughout the remainder of the year until Taker's injury. Kicking it off at the Royal Rumble 99, there were a lot of developments for the Ministry pretty quickly once it started to get going, and at the Royal Rumble he would recruit Mabel, King Mabel, and he would become Viscera. So he first recruited Dennis Knight, who would become Midian. Then the second member would be formerly known as Mabel, former King of the Ring, King Mabel, and he would become Viscera now under the tutelage of the Dead Man. So he now had Midian and Viscera inside of the Ministry of Darkness, and then more members would come down the line. But also during the Royal Rumble, Vince McMahon would win the Royal Rumble match. And at the time, it didn't really seem like anything to really take note of during the development of the Ministry of Darkness, but as we continue throughout the video, you'll understand exactly why Vince McMahon ties into everything, especially the higher power. Going into February of 99, The Undertaker would lead an attack on the Brood. He would take out Gangrel, Edge, and Christian alongside Midian, Viscera, and new members of the Ministry again in Farouk and Bradshaw in the Acolytes. So now the Ministry consisted of Midian, Farouk and Bradshaw, The Undertaker, and Viscera, and they would go on to attack the Brood and really just viciously attack them, even going as far as to, I don't even want to say it because I don't want to affect the monetization, but would go on to, I guess, sacrifice Gangrel over the top rope. And he would go on to do that again with another member of the corporate ministry. Well, not at the time, but it would lead into the corporate ministry in the Big Boss Man, but we haven't gotten that far yet. After the vicious attack on Gangrel and the rest of the Brood members, later on the same episode of Raw, they would be revealed as new members of the Ministry. And that attack wasn't done just to take out more members of the Raw roster and, to cause anarchy among the higher power. It was more done to use that as a rite of initiation to just recruit more members for The Undertaker's faction, and that's exactly what he accomplished. And the strength in numbers for The Undertaker and his faction were growing by the minute, now consisting of the Acolytes and Farouk and Bradshaw, Edge, Christian, and Gangrel, and Midian, along with Viscera. Now we move on to February 22nd, 1999. This is where The Undertaker would take on Brother Kane, or Storyline Brother Kane, in the second ever Inferno match in the WWF. And it would be the only two members of the WWF roster to ever compete in an Inferno match as well. He would go on to defeat Kane by setting his leg on fire, but the real reason behind this match was the fact that Kane was a member of the corporation under Vince and Shane McMahon, along with The Rock, Big Boss Man, Ken Shamrock, etc., etc. And this would really, early on in the ministry's development, it would be a battle of the factions. It would be a faction war between Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon's corporation alongside the Ministry of Darkness. And would the darkness reign supreme, or would the elitists kind of take over, which is really what the 1999 year of pro wrestling was, and just 1999 in general. It was kind of like going against the elite, going against the people who are at the top, and, branching out on your own, kind of like an underground feel to it. And I feel like that's why the corporation and the ministry story worked so well for the time period. I know this is kind of backwards, but I wanted to include it anyway because it does lead into the story development of Undertaker in late 99. Paul White, aka The Big Show, would make his debut at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, or In Your House St. Valentine's Day Massacre, on February 14th, and he would actually attack Stone Cold Steve Austin and throw him through the cage, but that would open up the cage and allow for Austin's feet to hit the floor and defeat Vince McMahon in their ongoing rivalry. So even though the plan backfired for Big Show, Paul White, aka The Big Show, made his debut early in 99, and he will play into The Undertaker's career later in this year. We would now head into WrestleMania 15, which would continue the Corporation versus Ministry storyline, where The Undertaker would take on Corporation member in the Big Boss Man in a Hell in a Cell. Now, it doesn't really matter how the match was, and I'm not here to tell you how good or bad the match was, but it's really what happened at the end of the match. The Undertaker would hit a tombstone inside the Hell in a Cell and pin the Big Boss Man, but then as the cell was about to go up, the members of the Brood would appear on top of the cell in Gangrel, Edge, and Christian, and Paul Bearer would have the mechanism to stop the Hell in a Cell from going up right away. During that time, Gangrel, Edge, and Christian would cut a hole into the top of the cell and pass a noose down to The Undertaker. And The Undertaker would again, for lack of a better term, sacrifice the Big Boss Man as Paul Bearer would raise the cell. This is one of the darkest images of the Attitude Era. This is one of the best images to represent the Ministry of Darkness, and it really just continued to propel this storyline and propel the eerie, dark feeling and the occult-like leader feeling that The Undertaker had during this point in his career. But yes, Undertaker would defeat the Big Boss Man and sacrifice him all in the process to just continue the rise in power of the Ministry. On April 26, 1999, The Undertaker would kidnap Stephanie McMahon, the daughter of Vince and Kennedy McMahon, as I'm sure all of you already know, in order for Vince and Kennedy McMahon to give up full control of the World Wrestling Federation to the Ministry. This would take place the night after Backlash 1999, where The Undertaker would have a one-on-one match with Corporation member in The World's Most Dangerous Man, Ken Shamrock. The match was pretty back and forth, and for the time it was more grapple-heavy based and traditional combat sports and traditional wrestling than we had seen at this point in the WWF or in pro wrestling at any point when it came to the big stages such as WCW or the World Wrestling Federation. But Undertaker would go on to defeat Ken Shamrock after reversing Shamrock's attempt at a tombstone into his own tombstone and getting the 1-2-3, and then it would carry over into this storyline. This was another really dark turn in the story development of The Undertaker's Ministry faction, and he would go on to complete a dark wedding or Eldritch ceremony where he was going to marry Stephanie McMahon in the middle of the ring, surrounded by the Ministry members, as Paul Bearer would read the ceremony out loud. Luckily for Vince and Kennedy McMahon, Stone Cold Steve Austin would come to the rescue and be able to save Stephanie from The Undertaker. This would lead up to Stone Cold and Vince and Kennedy McMahon actually joining forces to combat the Ministry, but most importantly to combat The Undertaker from getting hold of the WWF Championship, which would again aid in the control of the Ministry over the World Wrestling Federation.
You take me to him! Take me to the son of a bitch!
Following the developments after the kidnapping of Stephanie McMahon, it would be revealed that it was actually her brother Shane who wanted to have this kidnapping occur so that he could maintain control of the WWF and overthrow his father and owner of the World Wrestling Federation in Vince and Kennedy McMahon. He orchestrated the entire thing to make sure that Vince could give up the power that Shane could never have up to this point. This would then lead to the formation of the corporate ministry, where the former Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon run corporation, now specifically and exclusively run by Shane, would merge with the Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness to create even more of a power dynamic in the WWF. We would then head into Over the Edge 1999, where The Undertaker would challenge Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF Championship. So it would basically be the alliance of Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vincent Kennedy McMahon going up against Undertaker and Shane McMahon, which was basically the WWF again going up against the corporate ministry. This match would unfold where the referee would be taken out. Vince McMahon would come down to the ring to try to count a 3 count after Stone Cold Steve Austin hit a stunner on The Undertaker and tried to retain his championship. However, Vince, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Shane would all come to blows in the middle of the ring. Shane McMahon would push Vincent Kennedy McMahon into Stone Cold Steve Austin, which would throw him into The Undertaker into a sort of schoolboy roll-up pin, and then Shane McMahon would count the 1, 2, 3 in a fast count and crown The Undertaker as the new World Wrestling Federation champion. And the clouds of darkness just continued to shed over the World Wrestling Federation, and it seemed as if Vince could never get the control back. However, as the story continued to unfold, we learned exactly why that was. On the June 7th episode of Monday Night Raw, the higher power was to be revealed. Who was giving The Undertaker all of these duties to carry out along with the ministry? Who was giving the orders for the corporate ministry? And who was in charge of this entire group and cloud of darkness that now reigned over the WWF and held its richest prize in the game in the World Wrestling Federation Championship? That, in fact, was Vincent Kennedy McMahon. It was revealed that this entire story with the kidnapping of Stephanie McMahon, Shane McMahon with the corporate ministry, Shane McMahon orchestrating the kidnapping with The Undertaker and the ministry, was all a scheme for Vincent Kennedy McMahon to stick it to Stone Cold Steve Austin and to wrestle the World Wrestling Federation Championship away from him. Even though The Undertaker would gain the WWF Championship, the reign would be short-lived, and he would lose the title back to Stone Cold Steve Austin on the June 28th, 99 episode of Monday Night Raw. Steve Austin would counter a chokeslam into the Stone Cold Stunner and pin The Undertaker for the 1, 2, 3 to become the new champion. After this, obviously the entire corporate ministry and ministry storyline was starting to fizzle out, as we spoke about earlier, and they would go into Fully Loaded 1999 in a First Blood match where Stone Cold Steve Austin would again defend the WWF Championship against The Undertaker, and Undertaker would be busted open and lose that match as well, with Stone Cold Steve Austin retaining his championship. The night after Fully Loaded 1999 on Monday Night Raw, Undertaker would seek revenge on X-Pac due to the fact that he was the one who caused Taker to lose the championship match to Austin after hitting a spinning back kick to a steel chair, which would bust The Undertaker open, thus resulting in his defeat. As Undertaker would go after X-Pac, Kane would come out to save his tag team partner. X-Pac and Kane would then slowly get the upper hand on The Undertaker until Big Show Paul White would come out and save The Undertaker from the attack. This would result in the formation of a tag team between The Undertaker and the Big Show Paul White, and it would become known as the Unholy Alliance. The team didn't last for that long, and I feel like a lot of pro wrestling fans and Undertaker fans don't like to mention that this ever happened, because I don't ever remember hearing about this much when I was younger. But besides the fact they were 2-time World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions, and they've defeated the likes of Kane and X-Pac and the Rock and Sock Connection, winning the titles after defeating Kane and X-Pac at SummerSlam 1999. They would actually defeat the Rock and Sock Connection in one of the only ever weekly televised Buried Alive matches on an episode of SmackDown, and they would defeat the Rock and Sock Connection after Big Show was trying to bury Mankind in the grave, but then Triple H would come out and hit Paul White in the back of the head with the sledgehammer while The Undertaker was consumed with The Rock on the stage, and Triple H would then take over and end up burying Mankind for Big Show. However, in the process, Big Show and The Undertaker would become the WWF Tag Team Champions. On the September 23rd, 99 episode of Raw, The Undertaker refused to compete in a casket match against Triple H and said that maybe he didn't need to be in the World Wrestling Federation for much longer anyway, and he would take a step away until 2000. He did compete on a house show in late 99, but his actual return to the WWF wouldn't take place until he debuted as the American Badass towards the tail end of 2000. He went away because he suffered a pectoral injury while he was rehabbing a groin injury. So he went out with the groin injury, and then while he was rehabbing, he actually sustained a pectoral injury as well. So even though it was storyline based, he just needed some time away to heal, get back into ring shape, and then come back to the WWF. thus debuting some people's favorite Undertaker character of all time in The American Badass. But that concludes The Undertaker in 1999, his work in 99, and the corporate ministry, the Ministry of Darkness, and everything in between. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joined the channel after that Jey Uso video. It's blown up so fast for me. It's like at around 500,000 views in just a few days. And I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. We're going to have a lot more pro wrestling videos, mixed martial arts breakdowns, mixed martial arts fighter breakdowns, UFC card predictions, WWE storyline videos, and anything you can think of. So I just want to say thank you. This has been The Undertaker in 1999. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out. But before we go, don't forget to hit a choke slam on the like button and a tombstone pile driver on the subscribe button. And if you want to, roll your eyes in the back of your head for the notification bell, because even though you can't see it, you'll be notified for every single upload on the Touch 'em Up Podcast YouTube channel.